Okay, here we are in the lab again. Welcome to episode 5 of the Retro 1993 PC build. So we got DOS on there, and so we need to get Windows on there next. But since our hard disk controller doesn't support a CD-ROM, so we got to get data into this machine. And we're reaching a point where using the floppy disk is just not quite going to be a long-term solution. So until we can get a CD-ROM on there, we're gonna, and even with the CD-ROM, we're gonna want network access so we can transfer data over the network from the other PCs, and we're gonna do some internet stuff, but we can't access the internet like when it was in 1993, because a 1993 computer just does not have the ability to do encrypted secure web pages and CSS and PHP and all that stuff. They can't do it. So we're going to set up a network card first and get it Windows working with it. And then we're going to have to later download an FTP client so that we can FTP files back and forth and access some web pages on the local machines, on the local network. And then we'll work on getting out to the internet and stuff like that. But first, we got to get the network card installed, get it set up, and then we'll install Windows. And that will probably take, because I'm going to do the Windows to where it is the real-time installation, just so everybody can see it. Those of us that know how painful it is, we can just skip right on past it. But so just for, to get it documented how long it took for this particular computer to install Windows and putting the floppies in and all that stuff. So I'm going to do that in real time, the whole shebang. So we'll get that in and get that behind us, and we'll move on to some more exciting stuff. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, so I want to move some stuff around a little bit. So let's move the video card to the bottom, because we don't have to do anything with that. And then we move the hard drive controller up to the very first one, so the floppy can fit in the bay without pulling the ribbon cable tight. So let's do that real fast. Find a screwdriver, and so we'll take that off right here and take this screw out right here. Pull the card out. Then we'll pull this screw out. This guy fits tight if I remember. Not too bad. All right, so then this one will go to the top like that. Okay. Get the screw back in there. Alright. Then we'll put our video card at the very bottom. Alright. That baby's in there. Whoa. And it doesn't matter on these slots because they're all identical. So the computer doesn't even know. I can't get that to stay on there. Okay, here we go. This has to come down a little bit. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we want to get a network card in, and I have this one. I found this brand new in the box from 1997. This was made in 97. This is the oldest one I could find that was a good deal. And this is, I mean, it's kind of cool that it was new in the box. But the important thing is that it has an RJ45 plug, like modern Ethernet, because in the old days, the most popular item was the 10 base T with the BNC connector, and then you had to connect it to the network server and stuff with that coax cable, and you had to have a terminator at the end of the line or it wouldn't work. And obviously I don't have anything like that on my other computers, so we had to have an RJ45. So this is like the best I could do at the time. And so it's obviously we don't have plug and play. So we're going to have to do a manual driver install for this card, because also it's what Microsoft had is, I think it was called NDIS network. It wasn't TCP IP, and that's what we need is TCP IP. So we have to get this thing installed, get it set up, the hardware set up, and then we have to set a driver for Windows to do TCP IP. And so we'll probably use Trumpet, a Trumpet WinSock program, a third party. And so we'll get that set up on here. So let's get this card in and set up the hardware and go from there. All right. All right, let's open up this thing here. All right. Get the plastic off. All right, that's the hard part. Okay, shouldn't need that anymore. All right, looks like it slides out like that. Opens up like this. Look at that. Read me first. Look at that. Oh, we got 2 discs. Plug and play Ethernet LAN card. Plug and play. Oh, that might be too new for us. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it work. So get these guys out here. See what it looks like in here. All right. Look at that. Looks pretty good, huh? All right. There it is. Brand new. Kind of amazing. We don't need that, but let's set this down here. We're going to need the discs and everything else we shouldn't need. We might have to look at the documentation. I don't know. Let's see how it installs. Okay. Okay. Da-da-da, that'll go on my shelf. And now we'll put in our network card right here. And we'll put that next to the last down there. Doesn't really matter. There's no jumpers on it or anything either, so we'll just put that bad boy in there like that. And we got to find a screw. Okay. Perfect. All right, now we got a network card. And then, see, when we put our floppy drive in. We're almost ready to do that. When it goes up in there like that, then the cable isn't tight like it was before. So that's pretty cool. I like that. Okay, let's set up the network card. So we got our network disk that came with the network card, our setup disk in drive A. So we'll go over there and look at it. And dir/w. All right, there's the files. We have to go in to utility, cd utility. All right, and dir/w. All right, not too much in there. The diag you have to run, that's just part of the setup program, so all we can do is just run the setup. This will set up the hardware of the network card. All right, hit enter. There's our card. So the node ID, we call that the MAC address mostly nowadays. Bus mode 16-bit, card type, that's the name of the card right there. IO base address, that's good. 300 is a good, that's a regular network card base address. Interrupt number 10, we'll stick with that. That's good. See, it's an RJ45. IRQ, it's just plug and play is disabled. We don't have that full duplex. We want that. That's where it goes back and forth at the same time. And sends and receives at the same time. Remote boot, no. Everything seems to be good. We can run the diagnostics. And everything's passing as we expect. It's brand new. So that means the computer, the CPU is able to send and receive information, read from the registers, right to the registers of the network card. And so we're all good. All right. I don't know how many cycles it does or if we're supposed to hit escape. It's good. I'm happy with it. We'll just hit escape. Okay. Network, we don't have the network set up yet. Okay, I think we're good. So we will escape out of here. Okay, so we have our network card installed and we got it set up to our proper hardware settings for our system. Now, this is where we're going to deviate from the norm because Windows 3.1 did not have any TCP IP built in. It did not have that. They used a protocol called NetBUI to go on to the network, but and that will work. But we want to eventually get onto the internet. And even back in the old days, when you used Netscape Navigator, you had to have a TCP IP stack installed on your Windows to do that. So the very first thing we got to do is to get a packet driver. So we're going to jump online and get a packet driver and transfer it to the system. And then we'll install Windows and go from there. Okay, so let's grab Chrome here. And I think it's, let's do a search. NE2000 driver, that's the one we're looking for. This Bogons driver library. This is one we're going to try out. And so we want to go to networking. And then we want to go down and find NE2000 packet driver. That's what we're looking for. And then click here to begin download. And then I already downloaded that earlier. So we have that there. So then it's what we want to do. So we want to get a new file explorer here. And we want to go to downloads and extract all right here. All right, so this is what's inside. So we'll use the ne2000.com driver. And so now we're going to do a little bit of something different from what we've done before. Okay, so before we used the other computer and we just used the floppy from our retro computer and put it in the other computer and downloaded files onto the floppy, but we're going to do a little something different this time. I got this thing here. It's kind of like a Frankenstein, and it's from a different project that I had. So it's just a floppy emulator. You can buy them online. They're not real cheap, but they're not real expensive either. So you got your USB stick here. It just plugs in. So this just plugs in like a regular floppy drive. So you just plug it in onto because you can do 2 floppy drives on this ribbon cable on our retro. So we'll plug this in, and then we'll, the only thing is you can't unplug and plug the USB back in and have it work. Every time you unplug the USB from it, then you have to shut the system down and restart it to get it to work. But it's still a little bit easier because you can just do this, stick this in the computer, download the file to it, and then stick it in here like that, and then put it in the retro computer, and then it thinks it's floppy drive B. So it's kind of, it's good for like just single files or small files. That's why we need to get on the internet so we can do some serious file transfer. All right, so let's take that file we downloaded and put it on our thumb drive here, and then we will transfer it over. Okay, so here's the directory here where we downloaded. We don't need the 2100. We just need to grab the 2000.com, and we'll copy it, and then we bring it over here to our USB drive here, and it looks like we got stuff on it already, so we will select everything and delete it. Yes, we do. All right, and then we will paste that. Okay, so that's on there, and so we will move it over to the other computer and save it to our C drive. Okay, so now we just want to grab our ribbon cable here, and it looks like it's tangled up a little bit right here. We can just turn that around a little bit. That didn't help. We're just going to have to unplug this cable here like that and get it untwisted. Plug that back in here. And then drive B is this other one right here. All right, because the way it determines it, see how this is twisted right here on the ribbon cable? That, the drive connected to the twisted end is drive A. And then the one in here will be drive B. All right. There I go, twisting it up again. All right, so we got this in here. Then we just take the ribbon cable, we plug our drive in with the red conductor next to the power cable. All right, just like that. And then we got one more power, so we can plug that on there just like that. All right, and so that should work. I get my flash drive, and we will plug that in right here. USB is the only thing that only works on the second try. Okay, so let's get it off the keyboard a little bit. All right, so let's hit our power here. Okay, so now we want to go to drive B and make sure that it's there. All right, good deal. That's on our drive B. So then we just want to copy the NE2000. So we'll like make directory C backslash, we'll just call it NIC for the network interface card. All right, and then we will copy NE2000.com to C backslash NIC. Enter. All right. Then if we go CD, we have to go C first. Then we go change directory to NIC, and then we go dir, and there's our NE2000.com. Okay, so we got that in there, and okay, so then we can manually load it to see if it's going to work with our network card. So if you remember, the settings of our network card was address 300 hex, IRQ10. Okay, so we're going to tell it to load it manually. So we will go NE2000.com and OX60, which is OX means hexadecimal. And this first one is the software interrupt vector. Okay, that's the default is 60. It should be fine. Then we want to use our IRQ that we had. So our IRQ was 10. And then we want to put our hardware, our network card hardware address, which is OX hexadecimal 300. All right, so that should load it. Let's see what happens. And there we go. So you can see the packet driver, blah, 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 system, ISA bus. We have two interrupt controllers. That's on the motherboard. Then we have packet driver software interrupt to 60, like we said it. Hexadecimal 60, which is 96. Interrupt number 10, that's hexadecimal A. And so IO port hexadecimal 300, and which is decimal 768. And this is how we know when you see this, you know it's successful, because that's the MAC address, the unique MAC address of the network card. So we're good to go. So we'll stick that in our AutoExec file, and then we'll load Windows. Okay, so we want to put edit our AutoExec file so that it loads the network driver whenever we restart the system. So we will do the edit command and AutoExec.bat, enter. All right, and then we'll just type in what we did before. We have to tell it where it's at, so we have to go C backslash NIC backslash NE2000.com. Then we space our software interrupt vector. Whoops, gotta get an X in there, OX60. Then our IRQ, and then our hardware address. All right, and you could do a non-hexadecimal too. You could do the decimal number too, but whichever way you prefer. And that's it. So then we go Alt F, and we just hit exit and then it'll prompt us to save it, and we hit yes. And then if we restart our system, and there's our network driver loaded. Okay, now we're ready to load Windows. Okay, so we have everything ready except for the mouse. And we're going to do the mouse after we install Windows just to make it a little more interesting. Because we have some issues with that, and I don't want to drag this video out a long time. So we'll deal with the mouse after we install Windows. So that's next. So I'm going to run the whole install in real time. No cheating, no cutting, just the whole thing. And so that puts the video pretty long, but that's okay, because those of us that seen it a million times and don't want to endure the pain again, we can just skip over that. But the people that want to see everything, or maybe you want to see what files are loaded or whatever, or maybe you've never seen it before, that's fine. You get kind of a bonus. So this is going to be an extended video. So without further ado, let's load that Windows. A to go to drive A. Oh, better put a disk in. All right. R for retry. All right. So I'll do a dir, a directory, /W. Makes it go across the screen horizontally instead of a big long list vertically. All right. So the files with the underscore at the end, those are compressed files. Microsoft compressed the files to get more files on the disks. So later on, once they're copied, then Windows runs the expand program, and it decompresses the files, and so they can be used later. So the only program that we can actually run here is the setup.exe. That's the only executable file on here, other than the setup.txt. And you can look at the setup.inf file too. And I don't know what the .ssh is. Some kind of setup file. All right, so we just type setup, hit enter, and Windows setup has begun. All right, press enter to continue. F1 if you want to learn something more about Windows. They don't really say a whole lot, just that you can change things later. I usually do the Express setup because it's just Express. And you can always change stuff later. Enter. All right, now the long process of copying files. Five disks isn't too bad though. 20 is a lot, but 5 isn't too bad. But it still takes a while. So Windows 3.1 was released in April 6, 1992, and was the successor to Windows 3.0. It ran just like its predecessors. It ran as a shell on top of MS-DOS. It was the last Windows 16-bit operating environment, and all the future versions of Windows went to 32-bit. Windows 3.1 introduced the TrueType font system, which was a competitor to Adobe Type Manager. Multimedia was expanded. Screensavers were introduced. Windows Media Player and Sound Recorder was introduced. File Manager and Control Panel was upgraded. The introduction of Windows Registry was in Windows 3.1, and it could utilize more memory than its predecessors. There was also special versions of Microsoft Windows 3.1 throughout 1992 and 1993. In Europe and Japan, Windows 3.1 was introduced with more language support. In November 1993, Windows 3.11 was released as a minor update. And there was a Windows 3.2, which was a simplified Chinese version of Windows 3.1. There was Windows for Workgroups, which had integrated networking. And I was going to use that, but the integrated networking has nothing to do with what we want to do. So we're doing Windows 3.1. I think it's 3.11 should be. But anyway, we call it 3.1. The Workgroups was mostly for businesses to get, share printers and files and stuff on a local area network. It didn't it didn't have nothing to do with getting online and using TCP/IP. Windows 3.1 excited everybody about the user interface and the technical design. Sold over 3 million copies during the first 3 months of its release. But the Windows for Workgroups was considered a business disappointment due to its small amount of sold copies. Microsoft ended the support for Windows 3.1 series on December 31st, 2001. So it lasted a pretty good amount of time. The embedded version was retired in 2008. Windows 3.0 was released in 1990 and is considered to be the first version of Windows to really be acclaimed by everybody. 3.0 received around 10 million sales before the release of Windows 3.1. Microsoft did a television advertising campaign for the first time on March 1st, 1992. And they were designed to introduce a broader audience to Windows. Windows 3.1 also includes add-ons. Video for Windows was introduced in November 1992 as a reaction to Apple's QuickTime technology. It was later built into Windows in 1995 and Windows 95. Microsoft also published Windows for Pen Computing, a pen computing interface which was created in response to Pinpoint OS by GO Corporation. I never heard of that before. So unlike the previous versions of Windows 3.1, well, unlike all previous versions, Windows 3.1 could not run in real mode, and it insisted on the use of 8286 processors or above. So you could not run the Windows 3.1 on the original IBM PC, which used the 8086. And because of that, the maximum memory available was increased. Windows 3.0 was limited to 16 megabytes maximum memory. Windows 3.1 could access a theoretical 4 gigabytes in the 386 enhanced mode. The actual practical ceiling was 256 megabytes, which was a very huge number in those days. Windows 3.1 is the first version of Windows to be distributed on a CD-ROM. The setup interface was simplified, so we got our express mode for the install that we were just talking about. That was introduced in Windows 3.1. Also, the online tutorial. And I did not know this, but it supported the Advanced Power Management standard. Nobody cared about that in those days. So the version Windows 3.11 fixed some network problems which were present on Windows 3.1. It was a minor update over 3.1, so there were no new features. Windows 3.11 allowed users to connect to each other as peers to share the resources, peer-to-peer network. Microsoft replaced all retail and OEM versions of Windows 3.1 with Windows 3.11 and provided a free upgrade to anyone who owned Windows 3.1, which was probably nobody in those days. Everybody copied. But it probably couldn't tell if you copied it or not in those days, so it probably just upgraded. Anyway. Okay. So the first version of Windows, Windows 1, was unveiled in 1985. People didn't like it too much, didn't gain much traction. It relied on the use of the mouse, and nobody really used a mouse, even though later versions of DOS you could use a mouse, but nobody really did it. It was kind of, you would have to be like into the technical stuff and just want to do it, which we did. A lot of us did that kind of stuff, but most people didn't. Windows 2.03 was released in 1987, giving Windows more appealing look with 256 colors. It was the first Windows operating system to include Word and Excel. Huh. Then came Windows 2.1 in 1988. And this was the first version of Windows that you had to install on a hard drive to run it. So before that, you could run it off of floppy disk. It's pretty crazy. Windows 2.11 came out in 1989, improved memory management, for more efficiency. It also added support for the AppleTalk networking protocol. Kind of interesting. Windows 3.0 came out in 1990. That's when Program Manager and Program Icons came out. And it had support for CD-ROM drives. And it included Solitaire, Minesweeper, and Hearts. All right, so we don't have a printer. And there you go. There's our Windows. All right, we don't need to run a tutorial. So we will exit setup. And there we are. We are now in Windows 3.1.